Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denisha Price, and I am the current Chapter Activities Coordinator at American Concrete Institute. I would like to welcome you to our virtual leadership webinar series today. Today's webinar is Cybersecurity, Implications of COVID-19, and our speaker today is Dr. Barbara Shermatero.
Hi there. Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. She is the current professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where she focuses on cybersecurity. After 30 years as an information technology and cybersecurity professional, she joined the world of academia, where she has taught graduate and undergraduate courses on a variety of topics, including cybersecurity, emerging technology, complex systems, dynamics, software engineering, and project management. She has authored and edited books on quality assurance, virtual world technology, mobile technology, privacy, cybersecurity, social engineering, and forensics. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Barbara Shermatero, better known as Dr. C by some of her students.
Yes, my students who can't say my beautiful long Sicilian last name. Yes. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. So I would like to get started, and I think the plan, Denisha, is that you will keep track of questions and we'll keep time at the end to answer them. So please feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like as we get through this material. So
Yes.
Shall I begin?
Yes.
Wonderful. So today, what we're going to talk about are some of the increased cybersecurity risks that have occurred in parallel with the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of it, a lot of it taking advantage of the change in everybody's situations. So we're going to talk about the increased risk for remote workers. We're going to talk about the increase in viruses, malware, scams, other kinds of cyber threats. There's also a real concern with the kind of fraud that's occurring related to unemployment, stimulus, and other financial assistance. And lastly, we're going to talk about the challenges that the organizations face in securing their environment when they may not have all of their staff or resources available to them. So let's get started. I like to start with this slide because this lets us know the state of affairs. Their cyber criminals, cyber attackers are not sympathetic, empathetic, no concern whatsoever about the kinds of challenges people are facing. In fact, the opposite is happening. We see these criminals taking advantage of the situation. We see increases in spam, increases in malware, increases in malware loaded on websites. So you visit a website and you're not even aware of it. You automatically download a malware. So we're seeing an awful lot of increases, dramatic increases in a lot of these cybersecurity threats as these cyber criminals and attackers take advantage of some of the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that are occurring as a result of it. So one risk that has really been raised to the top of cybersecurity risks related to this pandemic are the number of employees who are now working from home. So 62% of employed Americans have reported that they've worked from home during the COVID-19 crisis. Now, as many of these employees had never worked at home before, they're unaware of the kinds of cybersecurity risks that are associated with remote work. A lot of the companies are not prepared for the amount of remote work, and their environments have not been set up to create security connections. as a result, people running off of their home networks are often in less secure environments than in corporate networks. The network is not controlled. The passwords are not controlled. The entry points into the environment are not controlled. The users of the system are not controlled in a home environment. And as a result, we're seeing cyber attackers taking advantage of these kinds of vulnerabilities. So what are some of the specific vulnerabilities that we see? Probably the top one are insecure home Wi-Fi networks. People do not use strong passwords, strong authentication. Their home Wi-Fi network is often left open and able to be accessed or easily accessed. Poor or no password protection, particularly if there's a number of people using the same computer, a number of household members, there will be no password protection on the computer at all, which leaves it wide open for cyber attacks. Many people will load virus protection, malware protection on their computers. Not everyone keeps them up to date, which is absolutely essential. But we also are seeing that people are not applying the same degree of concern on their mobile devices or their smartphones that they can use to connect to the work environment. So this lack of malware protection then allows any kind of malware, any kind of virus on these mobile devices to be transmitted into the work environment. As I said, if you're using your home computer to do remote work, or you're having your employees use their home computer, that computer or other mobile device is often shared by other family members, loading whatever software they want, connecting with whomever they want, playing whatever games they want. Many of these will open the door for cybersecurity risks. And another risk that is not quite as common, people are not often aware of it, is a lot of those personal assistants, the Amazon Echo, Alexa, or Google Home. If those are active and alive in an environment where you are using your computer, having conferences, talking to people, they are then have access to all of the confidential conversations that you are having because their job is to listen in. So that's another security concern that we see. So what are the kinds of cyber attacks that occur against remote workers? The most common cyber attack are phishing emails. 90% of all cyber attacks begin with phishing emails, 90%. If we could control clicking on phishing emails, we would have won a tremendous battle. The challenge is phishing emails are getting more and more sophisticated. People are masquerading as people you know, your bosses. I will get phishing emails periodically from my dean, from my chair. It's not from them, but they're asking me to connect or provide information. How do you know that they're not from the right people? You check what the source of it is. You check with the person, but phishing emails are extremely dangerous and extremely successful. So you have to be very aware of phishing anyone who's offering you anything, any type of email that appears to be unusual, something you didn't ask for. So be very skeptical of phishing emails. We're seeing, as a result of these phishing emails and also drive-by downloads that we call them on websites, we're seeing an increase in viruses and other malware. These are aimed at stealing your credentials, your login, your password, capturing keystrokes. Why? Because you are now accessing your business network. And that is opening the door to all kinds of information and data that cyber criminals would like to get their hands on. We've heard a lot about the insecure use of remote conferencing applications such as Zoom. So you have to be careful. You have to make sure in whatever application you use, conferencing application, that you set up the appropriate security. You use passwords, you invite people, you do not have open conferences. And lastly, we also see fraudulent applications masquerading at legitimate ones. Often these are applications asking to assist you if there is something wrong, if your computer is not operating correctly. Another unfortunate activity that's occurring is that we're seeing cyber attackers, cyber criminals using scams to prey on the very challenges people are facing in this COVID-19 pandemic. We see a lot of charity scams, people asking for money for fake organizations. Make sure that you follow up, you verify, you validate charities before you contribute money or give any financial information. Everyone's worried about their health, so there are a lot of health scams, offerings of COVID tests, vaccinations, cures. We are also seeing phishing and email scams that appear to come from a reliable source about the COVID-19 pandemic, asking for information or asking you to click on and link to a malicious website. We're also seeing cyber criminals preying on the kind of isolation and loneliness people are feeling with romance scams, connecting with you, trying to, usually in the end, extract money from you. And social media is another place where people are not aware of the number of scams that occur in it. One particular scam that I like to tell people are a lot of those what we think are fun games. Put your name, the name of your first car, the name of your dog, put all this in a string and see what you come up with. Everybody laughs at that. But these type of games are often used to collect information to be able to figure out what your password is or what your answers are to security questions if they were to go on a website or any kind of or email and try to change a password in your name. So what can you do? Make sure your home Wi-Fi network is secure. If you need assistance, contact your Wi-Fi vendor. They will give you a lot of assistance and can also provide you tools. Use a virtual private network to connect to the business. What this does is provide a protective tunnel so that your communications to and from the business are not able to be observed or captured by anyone outside of that network. Make sure your malware protection is current and up to date on your computer and all mobile devices. Everything is interconnected. So if you get malware on your phone and your phone connects via an app to your computer and you then use your computer to connect to your business, you are spreading all of that malware then to the work environment and potentially to other remote workers. If it's possible, do not let other family members use the computer you're using for remote work or load software on it. This will help minimize the risk. Disconnect your personal assistants when you're working so that they're not listening in on confidential conversations. If you're storing your work, your remote work on your home computer, be sure to back up. You don't want to lose it. And in the event of a ransomware attack, your only hope is to be able to get this information back from a backup. Follow security recommendations when using remote conferencing. Always require a password, always require invitations, and do not click on phishing emails. The other fraud that I talked about is unemployment and financial fraud. And we've seen that this fraud has cost the United States at least $77 million. I'm predicting it's much more than that. Scammers will often promise, we'll cut through all the bureaucracy, we'll get you access to your stimulus or your unemployment checks quicker. So they extract all kinds of information, and then they can obtain those stimulus or unemployment checks in your name. We will also see claims being filed for people who have not filed any unemployment claim. And so when in the event they have to, they're unable to because there's already a claim in their name. We are even seeing organized crime. The FBI has found evidence of international organized crime filing fraudulent unemployment claims because there's a lot of money in it and they're trying to get that weekly payout. The other fraudulent claim, sorry about that. The other fraudulent claim we get are people threatening to shut off your water, your gas, your eviction. They're trying to get you to pay them with these kinds of threats. So do not succumb to any of these threats. Scammers are seeing this current situation as a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of consumers. Organizations also have a lot of challenges because they often do not have enough staff and equipment to support the remote workforce. Their IT staff may never have had to support remote workers. They may have never had to establish a virtual private network. There may not be computers to be able to give to remote workers, which then requires the remote worker to use their home computer, which, as we've talked about, poses tremendous risks. There may be no established remote protocol. How do you connect? What's the proper way to connect, whether through a virtual private network or two-factor authentication? Two-factor authentication, many of you are using it. You enter your password, but then you also usually get a text to your phone that requires that you verify that it was yourself requesting access. Many companies have never put this in place, and so there isn't that kind of established remote protocol. There's also not enough control over access to company information. If you haven't controlled the environment, if someone remotely connects in, they could have wide access to everything in the environment. So that's another risk, because you always want to make sure that only people who need to have access to information have it. You don't want everyone to have access to payroll. You don't want everyone to have access to financial information. You don't want everyone to have access to proprietary information. The other challenge is that even if you try to control it in the business environment, the malware is now spreading from your remote workers through the office environment. So that's another challenge. You now have to control for threats coming in through hundreds of different connections. The insufficient staff also relates to not having the skill level necessary to monitor and respond to the kind of cyber attacks that we're seeing occurring during this COVID-19 pandemic. Not enough staff to be able to assist remote workers or to be able to continually monitor the environment that the business has, because to think that attackers are just going after remote workers is not. They know that businesses are running lean IT staffs, don't have all the systems in place to monitor. So they are increasing their attacks against business as well. And interesting, we're seeing that the high unemployment has resulted in a dramatic increase in cyber criminals. There is a low cost of entry, as I was talking about before this webinar started. Our whole toolkits of cyber attacking tools available free for download. So being able to initiate cyber attacks is not as difficult as we would like it to be. So what can organizations do? What can you do as the business owner? You can establish VPN. Make sure your employees connect through virtual private network. In their home environment, we want their Wi-Fi to be secure, but a lot of folks take their work computers to Starbucks, to McDonald's, to other places with open Wi-Fi where there is no control. The only control you can have over that connection is through this tunneling, this virtual private network. As I said, I would strongly recommend that you enable multi-factor authentication, that you put that second level on when people access your environment. So this would prevent a lot of people who are, because breaking passwords is not difficult. This would prevent a lot of false connections because you need the second layer of authentication. Control access to the organization's information need to know. Make sure people only have access to what they need to do their job. Another piece that has been threatened with the lack of staff, lack of resources, is that companies are not paying as much attention to making sure that their operating systems, their applications, their firmware, such as routers, are up to date with patches. This is a common, the common ploy is you survey environments, you're able to determine what level of patch. This is done very easily through the internet. What level of patches are different organizations using on their servers, on their routers? And cyber attackers know very well where there are vulnerabilities. So it is critical to keep everything up to date and patched in this environment. It may be more difficult to enforce, but establish policies for remote access. Establish a requirement for strong passwords. You may not be able to force password change every 90 days, but you can set policies for strong passwords, for secure conferencing, for malware protection, keeping that up to date. And lastly, implement mandatory cybersecurity awareness training. Cybersecurity awareness training has proven to be really the only successful method to stop phishing emails, because people are educated and trained on what to look for so that they do not click on phishing emails. So I think I've left enough time for questions, Denisha. Hopefully didn't run over.
Thanks, Dr. Sharon Matero, for a great presentation. Yes, at this time, we will allow any questions to come through. And I want to remind our attendees that they may use the question box to submit any questions they may have.
Sure. I love questions.
Okay, and it looks like we have a question that has come in. It states, our chapter website is open to the public. What protections should we be taking that keeps us safe, but still allow users to access important information?
Oh, very good. Websites are a common source of attack to you want your organization's website to be open to the public, but you want to make sure that the code that is written to develop that website is secure. And let me just point out one key thing, which is making sure that any entry fields, any place where you ask people to enter information, that you control for that entry of information. An example, if there's an underlying database behind the website, if you don't secure that entry point, people can enter a database command instead of information and get access to underlying information. So the real security of websites has to do with making sure that your website developers are using secure coding practices to not allow information, whether it's database or other kinds of information. Another called a buffer overflow. If you don't control for the number of characters, people enter so many characters, blow themselves out of that website into the underlying system. So a lot of website security has to do with the securing the underlying code.
Okay, and it looks like we have another question. It states, is there any way to protect us from hackers recognizing our keystrokes?
Well, the way that they recognize your keystrokes is if that malware has been downloaded to your computer. So the way to prevent that is to prevent malware from entering your computer. Common are in a desktop computer or a laptop phishing emails. On phones, smartphones, mobile devices such as iPads, a lot of applications and games that you download can have malware embedded in them. So be very, very careful. What you need to do is not allow that kind of keystroke monitoring software to be loaded and enabled. So you've got to close the doors for that.
Okay, it looks like we have some more questions coming in.
Good. I love questions.
The first slide indicated the US receives the majority of hacks. Why is that? Less secure networks?
I would say more available money and less and some practices that are less secure. There's a lot of available money and resources in the United States in terms of a lot of that had to do with financial. So gaining access to the stimulus, gaining access to people's finances. So the United States is targeted for that. We're considered generally a financially well-off country. So we're targeted a great deal. Most of it is for money.
Okay. The next question, any recommendation for good training videos?
Oh, there's a lot of good training videos. Oh my goodness, I don't like to recommend products, but there's a lot of organizations that do that that offer great videos. What I'll do is, Denisha, what I'll do is rather than throwing out one or two names, what if I send you a follow-up email with some sources of that you can then share with your members?
That would be great.
Okay.
And it looks like our last question, any recommendation for good, reliable malware protection software?
Well, I mean, I use Norton, there's McAfee, there's, I would, those are the two most well-known. I use them, um, and I rely on them. They don't do everything because malware has become very sophisticated. And if you have a very, very skilled hacker, they will try to bypass your malware protection. But I would use, those are the two most well-known. There's other ones out there. Those are the two most well-known. And
Okay.
on your phones and on your mobile devices, please. A lot of people say, well, it's on my computer, but you use your phone as your computer. So please download malware protection, because as I said, phone apps are many of them are filled with malware designed to capture your keystrokes, because you use your phone to access your bank, you use your phone to charge things. So
Okay.
I'll get off my soapbox, but
Okay, and it looks like they just sent us a second part to that question. Don't
okay.
malware/virus protection software slow down our computer?
I tell the joke. My son loves gaming, and he would always disconnect his malware protection when he would do gaming, and his computer was destroyed multiple times. Yes, it has some performance um, effects, but the challenge is slow. First of all, most of the computers nowadays are so powerful. If you have a newer computer, that I don't see any difference. The difference is a little bit of slowdown in performance versus your computer and all the data being destroyed and gone under ransomware, keystrokes, data breaches. I mean, there's a trade-off. There's always a trade-off with security and convenience, always a trade-off. But for me, the trade-off of a slight hit of performance far exceeds the risks of the kind of damage and destruction that malware does on your system, the kind of information it steals, the kind of data it can steal about you, steal your identity, steal your money. The risks far outweigh the little inconvenience of some performance hits.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like that's the last question for today.
Okay.
I just want I just want to remind our attendees that we have our last webinar of the series, which is scheduled on Wednesday, July the 22nd at 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. And the topic is social media for business, engaging with your members during a crisis. So if you haven't registered, I would suggest you register today. And this concludes today's webinar presentation. We hope that you enjoyed it and can use some of the information that was provided today. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.